If you've ever been to Germantown, Pennsylvania, you know the vibe. Beautiful stone homes, tree-lined blocks, centuries of history. But more importantly, this is the ground where America's first public protest against slavery was written. Let's travel back to 1688, just 5 years after the neighborhood was founded. 4 German Quakers gathered around a table. No marches, no crowds, just pen to paper, and a belief that no person should be stolen, bought, or sold. Their petition didn't change policy. It didn't even convince their own religious community. But it sparked something, an idea that would smolder for generations before finally igniting a national reckoning. Welcome to the 52 Weeks of First podcast, brought to you by Philadelphia's Historic District and Visit Philly. I'm Marisa Magnatta from Preston and Steve Show on WMMR. Joining me is Marquise Davon Richards, an educator, content creator, and host of the Keepin' It Bean podcast. His work sits at the intersection of Black history, media literacy, and cultural storytelling, using education and digital platforms to spark dialogue, build community, and push for meaningful change. Thank you for joining us, Marquise.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's such an honor to be here. Thank you. Yes.
Now, part of the 52 Weeks of First podcast is a lot of learning and a lot of experience. When we brought you on for this podcast, were you familiar with this story at all?
No, I was like in a space of learning again, and it was so exciting for me. I was just like, I had no idea this is where Germantown came from. I didn't realize that this was the inception of it all and even the history. So when this was presented, I was like, okay, I get to do a little history lesson of my own, which was exciting. Yes,
being in Philadelphia area. For how long have you been here?
I've been here 7 years now.
7 years. Yeah. And part of like the greater Pennsylvania region. We learn a lot about the Quakers. We learn a lot about our history, but maybe it's these small but impactful stories that we don't catch all the time.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that's like the coolest part, because it means that history is always unfolding. And there's so many different pieces that can connect us to how we got where we are at today, and even the inception of what it meant to have like your first moment to say, hey, something doesn't feel right here, and seeing how it can permeate into today set such a beautiful foundation for what we call home now.
Let's dive into the history.
Absolutely.
So, Pennsylvania began as William Penn's holy experiment. That's what he liked to call it. A peaceable kingdom built on Quaker ideals.
Right.
But the Quaker ideals didn't always match up to how these people were living.
Right.
Even the Quakers, including Penn himself, enslaved Africans and profited from the slave trade.
Right. And that's even like a tough thing to even think around, because I know as kids, when we learn about William Penn, we're just like, oh, he's searched for the forest. And like when we understand how Pennsylvania came about and all of this stuff. So we have such an idealized version of what the Quaker religion and how the Quaker lifestyle even meant in that kind of space. So I'm very fascinated on like the ideal versus what happened in practice and the tension that lives there.
Yeah, it also, brings up the idea that there are just parts of history that weren't taught, that were kept from us or just kept from around us, which is really cool to have platforms like this that we can talk about it.
Absolutely, which I'm excited for. So yeah, keep doing it.
So in Germantown, a group of German Quakers, hence that Germantown. Okay. I think we both had that
so put it together.
Moment. They see the contradiction and clearly decided that they needed to do something about it. So the year is 1688. And Francis Daniel Pistorius and his 3 neighbors. We have Garrett Hendricks, Derek Updegoff, and Abraham Ottegoff. They drafted a petition rooted in the Golden Rule: do unto others as you would want them to do to you.
Right.
I mean, we've been hearing that our whole lives.
Since kindergarten, I was like, treat others how you would like to be treated. And it's just a simple foundation of humanity in that exchange. So to see these neighbors share this ideal and being able to see others as humans, I think that's what kind of feels missed in our history sometimes, because they used to think we were 3/5 of a person, chattel, we were mules, we were animals. And so to see that they were able to recognize this, when I think around Quakers and how it shows them in education today, I'm like, oh, here's where we can start seeing the impacts of it permeate throughout history and into modern times. Yeah.
Now, this is something that we haven't seen so much in this series. These gentlemen just passed around that message. They would pass it around monthly, quarterly, yearly, each refusing to take a stand. It was nearly a century before the Quakers formally denounced slaveholding. Yes.
That's insane.
Isn't that
said, wait, hold on.
And so I bring it up because we have encountered so many people who decided like right then and there, it was time to take a stand.
Mm-hmm.
And these guys decided to make this peaceful protest.
Mm-hmm.
It took a century,
Yeah.
a quarter century.
Right. We have to reckon with this idea on, in order to get change, can change happen peacefully? And so even for them to write this down and just know that this was a shared ideal, and how do we continue to either shift the moral compass of a bunch of folks, but also for you to have the greater group denounce it. And it's like this idea that I play with a lot is like culture changes before policy does.
Mm-hmm.
And so when do we reach a critical mass of people that can all come to an agreement like, hey, this thing is wrong. What do we need to do to ensure like this can no longer happen with future generations as we get there? That means the idea was being had, but who was shut out of that conversation, and why were they shut out of the conversation?
Yeah. And you wonder, what other thoughts and ideals were formed out of seeing that message written down for a full century over and over.
Come on.
What else did it affect? Who else did it change?
Right. I think that's like the coolest part around like exploring the human condition and like, why do we see change then begin to happen? I think for me as an educator, what I appreciate about the ideals is that it teaches your students, one, how to be good people, how to be thoughtful people. But the more education you get, the more empathetic you should inherently become, because you understand from a place of humility, you have to learn and you have to be curious about another person's humanity.
Well, the first protest against slavery, it took a long time.
Right.
But it was written in stone. The seed was planted in Germantown, and Germantown as a community grew and becomes a foundational movement in the long struggle towards emancipation.
Right. This is a beautiful history.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And it does intertwine with so many other stories and so many other firsts that we've been exploring.
Which is so cool, like just seeing 250 years of America's inception, right? And then to think, what is America's identity and how has that either persisted? How has it regressed? What does that begin to look like? But to see a protest as simple, I would say, to be able to say like, hey, on this paper, what can we be able to do? And so even the idea that it wasn't as loud as other protests that we have seen, it is still a sharing of ideas that can then challenge what the norm was.
Do you think any of it applies that these guys weren't protesting for themselves, but they were protesting for other people on their behalf? And this was the peaceful protest that they decided?
Yeah, I think that piece of information and understanding of who their identity was, like these are 4 white men, right, that are also thinking around it, but also Germans, right? And so there is a conversation on how do you see the world fundamentally differently than what America was actually telling you it should be. And so for them to be leading the charge and show I have empathy and show that I have compassion for somebody else, that means you get to lead by example. And we tend to forget what leading by example can actually do for a group of people. And I always steep it in like being an educator, being a parent, whatever your identity is, right? Young people are impressionable. They're going to follow what you do more than what you say. So they want to be like, well, why are you walking like that? I'm going to walk like this. Why are you talking? I'm going to talk like that. Right. And so I think that part is so important as we think around when we want to enact change. It means that there is an interconnectedness. It's
so simple, but we need to be reminded of it. And it's okay to remind other people of it.
Absolutely.
Now, how do you do that in your education and in your personal activism?
My stuff is things around, one, educational justice. How can I give to students who look like me that I didn't get to have growing up? But then also another part of my activism is all around helping those who are formerly incarcerated. I've never been incarcerated, but I've been impacted by the carceral system. And so for me, how do I see and articulate what somebody else is experiencing, but able to kind of use my platform and or privilege or position to say, cool, I'm noticing there's a gap here. I have access to this college access work that I do on a regular basis. What does it look like for me to start shifting in that perspective, right? And be able to build a foundation for folks who might not have. And so part of showing up and part of my own activism is let me have human decency at the forefront. So instead of being like, what's wrong with you? Even though I might've said that earlier today, you have the question of like, what happened? Because what happened to you means that I now become curious about your situation and your condition versus saying like something is inherently bad about you or you did something that is wrong.
Humanizing each other.
Yeah. It's
making
simple.
Each other feel seen.
Yeah. And that's the long game too, right? Like somebody has to start. And so oftentimes there are folks who too early, some people who are right on time, and those who can say, well, hey, let's look back to see what's happening here, which was what was awesome for me to learn in this experience as preparing for this podcast and this conversation was like, oh, here's a piece of history I didn't even know about. And I'm up in Germantown on a regular basis.
Well, now you know.
Yeah.
And you get to share the story.
Yeah.
When you're up there and when you're around people and when you're just talking to anybody.
Yeah. Because it's such a cool piece of history that I just think we don't often get to like engage with. But now we can do it on a platform such as this to just say, well, how does this connect now? Because I think that's the part that's, and the teacher in me is always just like, what is missing in education? And why can it not be accessible? And how can we have this? And this is like such a perfect way of also pushing that message. But both of us were able to say, well, what did I receive from this piece of history that I can take into what today looks like? Yeah.
I think that's what makes Philly so special, and the entire team behind this whole year-long celebration, and just recognizing what's ahead of us and what's coming up and celebrating it week by week as we go along.
And that's the cool part. It's just like week by week, you just take it every single time, because we so often think so far ahead instead of just being like, well, what does this look week to week, day to day, minute to minute, second to second? How are we remaining present as we talk about the past? But you know what I mean.
I'll tell you what, we're realizing 52 weeks is not enough time to cover all of the firsts.
No, there's too many.
There are way too many. So you have your own podcast. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So Keeping It a Bean is a podcast that integrates conversation and commentary over a cup of coffee. So Keeping It a Bean, Coffee Bean, Keeping It 100. So how do we get to have these honest conversations to build community amongst one another? So just using storytelling as a way to build empathy and community. So that's about what Keeping It a Bean does. Yeah.
Is there any special line of coffee that we enjoy during this?
I see what you did there. And so you can also support Leroy's Blend, which is named after my pop-up Leroy. And so I told a quick history about him. He used to take me over the summers, and so he used to take me fishing. And so he said fishing is always a practice of patience and presence. And for me, what I really want folks to really indulge in when they taste my coffee is take time, grind the beans, heat your water, have your ritual that allows you to be present. But when you do that and you have it in a French press, you can actually taste the notes of butterscotch and chocolate and these brighter notes, because oftentimes we're quick with the coffee.
Yep.
But what does it mean to sit down with it a little bit? So one, it's how I get to invoke the lessons that he taught me as a young kid, as a young warthog, growing into as I get older. And so every time you go buy a bag of my coffee, you're also donating to an HBCU scholarship fund. And so you get to also put a little bit of impact behind your dollar as well.
Tell me about that scholarship fund.
Right now, the scholarship fund is able to fund either students who are interested in going to an HBCU, but it's also an opportunity to help if students are struggling buying books, because it is tough in college right now.
Oh my gosh, yes.
But it does help support youth that are interested in going to HBCU and helping through their matriculation process. And so it is a really cool opportunity that Gary Johnson III and I were able to have together and build out from there. And so I'm just happy to be a part of the mission and be able to just pay it forward in our own way.
Paying it forward.
Yeah.
Treat others as you want to be treated.
Yep.
Humanize each other.
Yes. And pay it forward.
And pay it forward.
Yeah.
We're learning things hundreds of years, and we're going to keep continuing it into the future.
Absolutely.
Pass the message along.
All the time. I love that.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Marquise.
Thank you for this conversation. Thank you for what you're doing with this project. It's awesome.
We appreciate you so much. Thank you for joining.
All righty.
Thanks for joining us on this week's journey through Philadelphia's firsts. Follow us on social media using @52FirstsPhilly. And if you enjoyed the episode, share it with someone who you know loves a good origin story. We'll see you next week.